I think I figured out the original ending that was planned for Ever After High. Hi, I'm Ainsley from Fairy Tale Vibes, and you may know me for my Ever After High swapped at birth theory, but I actually think I figured out another alternate ending that was possibly originally planned for Ever After High that actually makes a lot more sense than the Ever After High swapped at birth theory. But the first thing we need to address is my main motivation for creating the swapped at birth theory, which is the fact that Apple has blonde hair. And the reason this is such a motivation for me creating the swapped at birth theory and also the theory today is because of this book. I just want to address the main criticism that I receive for the Ever After High swapped at birth theory is that, oh my gosh, just because Apple has blonde hair doesn't mean that Snow White isn't her mom. You can have, a mom with black hair and a daughter with blonde hair. That makes sense. I know this. My dad has black hair, I have blonde hair. This is not some sort of mystery to me. What is a mystery to me is why Apple White is the first one in her long line of Snow Whites, because Apple's mom is not the first Snow White. There have been many Snow Whites before her mom, and when Apple graduates Ever After High, she will become the next Snow White. And it is mentioned multiple times in this book, which is the first Ever After High book by Shannon Hale, the Storybook of Legends, how weird it is and how unusual it is that Apple White has blonde hair. It is mentioned one time by one of her servants, and the servant brings it up, and they're just kind of like, yeah, she's pretty, but she doesn't have black hair like her mom. Also, literally in this book, Baba Yaga calls Apple a disappointment because she has blonde hair, because again, it is not just genetics, it is part of her destiny. The destiny of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White is supposed to have black hair. It's literally, again, written into the Brothers Grimm that Snow White has skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as dark as ebony. Additionally, in this book, which is the next Shannon Hale book, the Evil Queen also brings this up and literally asks Apple if she's adopted because she has blonde hair. Again, not saying it's impossible Snow White genetically had Apple. I do believe it's possible Snow White genetically had Apple. I'm just saying that there is something sus going on. Additionally, these books, let's be honest, they are meant for kids. They are not the most advanced reading. And Apple having blonde hair isn't a little nuanced thing. It's a thing, it's a small detail, but it's a small detail that both these books draw attention to multiple times. And if you're writing a book for a kid and there's a little plot point that you really want the kid to pay attention to, aren't you gonna make a big deal about it? Again, this is one of my motivations for making the swapped at birth theory. It's just how many times these books bring up the fact that Apple has blonde hair, and also just the fact that they bring it up that it's weird and it's not in line with her destiny for her to have blonde hair. So I have been for most of my life as an Ever After High collector trying to figure out what these books meant and what Shannon Hale was building up to. And again, I think the swapped at birth theory is a possible explanation to this, but it's not the best explanation. So that leads us to our theory here today, which is a theory of another possible alternate ending that I think could have been planned at the beginning of Ever After High. Now, if you follow me on TikTok, this may sound familiar because a while ago I posted this TikTok where I was in my car. I had just driven home from my friend's party and it was dark out. And basically I was driving home, at night. It's very kind of liminal driving home in the dark at night. And I was thinking to myself and I was like, Apple having blonde hair is really weird. And I just kept thinking about this, and then I started thinking about some other weird plot points from, maybe this book and maybe some of the webisodes and some of the other books. And I was thinking about all these things and I just kind of had an aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I came up with a theory that explains all these weird factors. I think I know what the original planned ending for Ever After High was supposed to be. Now, like I said, I think this is the original planned ending. I don't think this is the ending that would have actually happened because I think by the time they got to Epic Winter and Dragon Games, I think in fact by the time they got to Sprung on Sprung, a lot of these plot elements had switched around. I think that this is just perhaps the original ending that, the developers of Ever After High told Shannon Hale to head towards. I do think eventually in Ever After High's development, this ending changed, which we'll get into later in the video, but I think this was the original planned ending and the original explanation as to why Apple has blonde hair. So let's get into some of the other weird things that I want to discuss. So this book. In this book, this book is called A Wonderland of a World. And something weird that happens in this book is there's a part in this book, if you've seen my Ever After High retelling, I think it was my Ever After High retelling episode 3, I covered this book, which spoilers for this book. There's a part where kind of the Jabberwock takes over Ever After High and he makes everyone kind of weird and Wonderlandful, and he makes them all turn into something relating to their destiny or their name. So Apple turns into an apple, Raven turns into a raven, everybody's turning into stuff. I think I feel like somebody turns into a tree. Is that Hunter? I don't know. Yeah, maybe because he like chops down trees. I don't know. And then Cedar, she actually turns into like a real girl. But what is weird is Daring turns into a beast. Now, again, we know from Epic Winter he was destined to be the beast. So that's not too weird from a future perspective. But again, at the time, this was written like way before Epic Winter came out. And the reason I'm saying it's weird that Daring became a beast at this time is because before this and during this, there was nothing else indicating that Daring was supposed to be the beast. Again, at this time, he was still being like shipped with Apple. Like everybody thought he was Apple's true love. He was kind of like dating around, but everybody thought he was Apple's true love. So at first, when I reread this book from Ever After High Retelling, I was like, oh my gosh, this was actually like an Easter egg that Daring was always supposed to be the beast. And then I thought about it more and I'm like, no, that's actually weird because also in this book, he was being shipped with Lizzie. So why are they saying he's destined to be the beast, but also shipping him with Lizzie? I thought that was weird. And not only in this book, they doubled down on it in the next Ever After High book, which the next Ever After High book after this is actually Next Top Villain, which was written by Suzanne Selfers. This one was written by Shannon Hale. But in the Suzanne Selfers books, again, Lizzie is also being shipped with Daring. Like there's an ongoing romance, and we also see the romance in the webisodes. Like they go on a date in the webisodes, and then the romance just kind of drops off. And then later on, Daring dates Rosabelle, but it's like, what happened to his romance with Lizzie, and why literally from the first book where they start shipping Daring with Lizzie, were they also hinting at Daring being the beast, was like his romance with Lizzie always meant to fail, which maybe it was, but like that's weird. You gotta admit that's weird. But I think I figured out an explanation for this. So there are actually 2 Snow White stories in the Brothers Grimm, which I know we've talked about this before and you may have heard me talk about this before, but I'm going to dive a little more into this now. Basically, there's Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, but there's also Snow White and Rose Red. Now, a lot of you have asked me, which I do agree, like, couldn't Snow White and Rose Red be an explanation for why Apple has blonde hair? And that is because in the tale of Snow White and Rose Red, unlike the tale of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, Snow White and Rose Red actually does have blonde hair. And then her sister Rose Red has red hair. And I always thought that, you know, maybe Apple actually being the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red is an explanation to why she has blonde hair. I always thought that, but my problem with the theory that Apple was the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red is that I couldn't figure out who her sister would be. A lot of people often would tell me, oh, maybe it could be Raven. Maybe it could be Rosabella, maybe it could be all these people, but none of them made sense to me because, again, nobody in Ever After High actually really has fully red hair, and nobody really fit that description. And then I thought about it, and I was like, maybe Lizzie fits that description? And I started thinking more about it because the thing that happens in the story of Snow White and Rose Red, I'll give you like a miniature explanation. Basically, it's about these 2 girls. They live in a cottage. They're sisters. One is Snow White, one is Rose Red. There's this whole story with this bear, and this bear comes to their cottage, and they help the bear, and then later on they meet the bear again, and then they find out that the bear was actually a prince, and then one of them marries the bear that was the prince, and one of them marries the bear's brother. Now, I was thinking about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if Daring turning into a beast in this book was not actually a hint that he was like the beast from Beauty and the Beast, but what if it was a hint that he's destined to be the prince who turns into a bear in Snow White and Rose Red? And I was like, wait a second, what if Lizzie is Rose Red? Because, like, what if at this time they never planned for Wonderland to be freed from the curse? And what if, like, at this time when they were writing this book, they were thinking that Lizzie was going to have to stay in Ever After High forever, which if Lizzie stayed in Ever After High forever, she would never be able to become the Queen of Hearts. Okay? And if she never became the Queen of Hearts, and she's a royal, wouldn't she want to pick up another destiny? Do you see where I'm going? And what if Headmaster Grimm was like, oh my gosh, you know what? Actually, the reason Apple was born with blonde hair is because she's actually the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red, and because Lizzie no longer has a destiny, they're going to be paired together and they're going to become like fake sisters to fill out the Snow White and Rose Red destiny. And that actually also helps Raven's case because, again, at this time we always knew, like from this book, Raven was never going to follow her destiny. But again, that also fixes Headmaster Grimm's problem of having no evil queen because there's no evil queen in the story of Snow White and Rose Red. In fact, the villain is like this evil dwarf, which I'm not even gonna get into that. If you want to know the story of Rose Red and Snow White, look it up yourself. I just told you the factors you need to know for this video. But yeah, so what if they're gonna be paired together and then Daring was gonna be the bear / prince from that story? that's what happened to me when I was driving home from my friend's house. That's when I made this TikTok. I was like, oh my gosh, it explains everything. The only weird thing is that in the version that's in the Brothers Grimm, the prince who is the beast marries Snow White, and then his brother marries Rose Red. However, I was really racking my brain, and I feel like a long time ago I watched like a YouTube video about Snow White and Rose Red or something, and I feel like in the video, like whoever made it said that, oh, in some versions Rose Red marries the prince who is the bear, and in some versions Snow White, because then I was trying to figure out, I was like, wait, did that mean then that Daring actually was destined for Apple? Like, was Daring originally actually still supposed to marry Apple anyway? Or would it have been that, oh no, in Ever After High's version, because again, Ever After High, even though they say they follow the Brothers Grimm, they do change some things. So perhaps actually Lizzie was going to be destined to actually marry the bear prince, and she would marry Daring. And then I was thinking more about it, because obviously, like, Apple's not going to marry Dexter. So then does that also mean that Apple was always destined to be with Darling? Because the weird thing about Darling, and again, this is like another unanswered explanation, is Darling has always been in the Ever After High books from the beginning. Like, she's literally in this book, but she doesn't show up in the show till like around the time of Spring Unsprung. So it was clear that when Shannon Hale was like planning these books, she clearly had like Darling in her mind. Like, she's like, yeah, Darling's an important character. And also in all of Darling's books, like by Shannon Hale and by Suzanne Selfers, Darling is always painted as like somebody who's being secretly strong. Like, Darling was always training behind the scenes. Darling was always trying to like hide like, you know, her strength and everything. And she was always trying to appear like very demure. But in reality, she's like a warrior, you know? And I'm like, what if that is because Darling was actually supposed to be one of the brothers, quote unquote brothers, the brothers' princes, and she was gonna fall. And again, I think she probably would have fallen for like Apple still, but like she would have, like, basically one of them would have ended up with Darling, which again I think probably would have been Apple, and then the other one would have ended up with Daring. So that's kind of my theory for like the original planned ending of Ever After High. I don't know if that's even more far-fetched than the swapped at birth theory, or if that makes even more sense. Let me know in the comment section down below. But I do have some more alternate variations of how the Snow White and Rose Red thing could play out in Ever After High. So if you guys want to stick around for a little longer, I'm going to give you some more alternate versions, because again, I don't necessarily think that's a perfect explanation, because there's still like a lot of kind of holes in that. Like, how would they get there? Would everybody be okay with like Darling being a quote unquote prince, you know? Like I don't know. It's still kind of messy. So let's look at some other possible alternate explanations, which what I do know is I think whether or not like whoever Rose Red was supposed to be was set in stone, I do think if this alternate ending was correct, I think the writers at least thought from the beginning that perhaps Apple would be the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red, even if they hadn't figured out exactly who Rose Red was. So let's talk about some alternate versions of the Snow White and Rose Red theory. Let's talk about kind of like the most basic version of the theory, which I actually mentioned at the beginning of the video, which is the theory that Apple is Snow White and Raven is Rose Red. And let's talk about what makes sense with this. The obvious thing that doesn't make sense is Raven's purple. She's not red. That doesn't make sense. But a lot of the other things about Apple and Raven being Snow White and Rose Red do make sense. Again, because I'm still kind of like convinced of this, if Apple was actually originally the Evil Queen's daughter, perhaps instead of them being swapped at birth, perhaps they were both biologically the Evil Queen's daughter. That's another mini theory I've had for a while, just because I do kind of think there's a lot hinting at Apple being the Evil Queen's daughter. We're not going to get into that here. Again, you can go watch my swapped at birth theory, but there's a lot more evidence for Apple being the Evil Queen's daughter than Raven being Snow White's daughter, okay? So let's say they're both the Evil Queen's daughter. Then they could fit like the sister aspect of Snow White and Rose Red. And then again, if Apple was originally meant to be with Daring, like if she was originally meant to be with Daring, and maybe like the Darling thing happened later, they decide, oh, actually she's better suited for Darling. If she was originally meant to be with Daring, and Raven obviously is in love with Dexter, then that fits the brothers thing. And then Daring, like I said before, he would be the prince who turns into the bear, and then Dexter would be the other prince that Raven marries. Like, that makes sense. It also is kind of a parallel, like these two being Snow White and Rose Red, to the tale of two sisters, because if you guys know, in this book there's this whole background story about the tale of two sisters, and it's about these sisters named Bella's sister and Brutta's sister, and basically they were kind of like the original rebels. Like Bella's sister ran away because she didn't want to follow her destiny, because in the tale of two sisters, like Bella's the evil sister who like pushes her sister down a well, and she didn't want to do that, so she runs away, and we never actually really find out what happened to Bella's sister. I have a mini theory that maybe she like ran away to Monster High, but we don't really know. We never find out. There's never any explanation for it. Like Headmaster Grimm tries to make it look like Bella died in a cave, but later on we find out that Headmaster Grimm like made up that situation, like he framed it. So Bella did not die in a cave. She did run away somewhere. We don't know what happened, but perhaps like Apple and Raven could be like the next tale of two sisters, because like basically, I mean, like Snow White and Rose Red is a tale of two sisters. It's about two sisters, right? And also, like I said, it's weird because in the Tale of Two Sisters, the one sister is supposed to push the other sister down a well, which actually kind of has like a really weird parallel to Apple, because in the books, this is going to sound so weird, Apple gets, like, she falls down a well as a child, and for some reason Apple, like, throughout the books has like PTSD about this. Like, she's like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to be at the well again, like, and I'm just like, is that like foreshadowing that maybe she's supposed to be the sister gets pushed down the well, and maybe like somehow the destiny of the Tale of Two Sisters and Snow White and Rose Red is going to combine? I don't know. That's one explanation for it. Another explanation for it is that perhaps Rosabella actually was going to be Snow White and Rose Red. She was going to be Rose Red, because I mean Rose is in Rosabella's name. So maybe like similar to like, I don't have a Rosabella doll, but similar to like the Lizzie and Daring thing, perhaps actually Daring was always meant to get with Rosabella, and Rosabella would end up being the Rose Red, and then Apple would be with Darling or something. That's another possible explanation. I don't know. Again, it is weird that every single girl that Daring has been shipped with has like red in her color scheme somewhere. Like Apple has red in her color scheme, Lizzie and Rosabella have red streaks in their hair, so there is some sort of situation going on with Daring, which with maybe them playing around with him being part of the Snow White and Rose Red destiny and marrying Rose Red or something. I don't know. There is something going on with all the red in Daring. I don't know what that means, but there's actually one other girl that Daring is shipped with that we can talk about, which is Cerise. And there's actually not much really evidence in the show or anything for Cerise possibly being the Rose Red in this scenario. The really only small bit of evidence is that like they kind of flirt with each other in Throne Coming. My main evidence for Cerise possibly being Rose Red actually comes from the pilot, and that's because in the Ever After High pilot, instead of Apple and Raven being the main characters are Apple and Cerise, and like there's not too much that happens in the pilot. It's just the two of them walking to school together, but just the fact that the two of them being the original planned main characters. And actually, I'll look it up. I forget if Cerise may actually have red hair or reddish hair in the pilot. Anyway, I'll look that up and I'll put a picture of the pilot up here. But my main point about the pilot is that maybe if like Apple discovering that she's the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red was always the original planned ending, was always the original explanation for why Apple has blonde hair and why it's weird that she has blonde hair, and perhaps there's going to be some sort of dramatic reveal that Apple's like, oh my gosh, I'm not the Snow White from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I'm the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red. Like, perhaps if Cerise was the original co-main character with Apple, like, maybe that's because Cerise was supposed to be, like, Rose Red from Rose Red and Snow White. There's not much evidence to that. The only other, like, weird thing about if these two were planned to be Snow White and Rose Red is that, again, I haven't seen too much of Once Upon a Time. I've only watched a little bit, and that was a long time ago, so I don't remember the lore, but I feel like a while ago I saw a TikTok that actually in Once Upon a Time, like, there's a whole storyline with, like, Snow White and Little Red Riding Hood Once Upon a Time, and that storyline was kind of based off the idea of, like, Snow White being Snow White from Snow White, being Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red, and Little Red Riding Hood being, what's it called? Rose Red, like that whole storyline with them Once Upon a Time or something. And then I'm like, that's kind of interesting. But again, I feel like they wouldn't do that. Like, I don't think they would copy Once Upon a Time or anything. But, like, that's just also, like, a weird factor to consider, that there are kind of parallels anyway between Little Red Riding Hood and Rose Red. For example, both of them being raised in, like, a cottage in the woods. I don't know. There's there's weird things going on here. I do still think if Applewhite was originally planned to be the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red, I do still think the best explanation is that Lizzie would be Rose Red. I think it most lines up with Lizzie. Oh, I forgot to say earlier, again, she was originally, like, you know, meant to be the Queen of Hearts, and a big thing with the Queen of Hearts is, like, painting the roses red. Like, that kind of lines up with Rose Red. Not really. It doesn't really line up with, like, the Destiny or anything, but just, like, the fact that painting the roses red is, like, a big thing for her, and she has so much red in her color scheme. But yeah, I feel like also perhaps, like the writers wanting Daring to, like, end up with Rose Red or something maybe is a reason why so many of his love interests are red, is because they were always maybe, like, saying, like, okay, maybe, like, we could do a reveal of Apple being, like, Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red later on, so let's always just, like, keep a character who could be Rose Red, because it is weird how many of Daring's lovers, I guess, are red. Like, have you ever thought about that? Have we ever considered that as a society? The only thing that I'm really sure of is that I think at some point in some author's mind, they thought Apple was the Snow White from Snow White and Rose Red. I think the authors just couldn't agree on, and when I say authors, I mean, like, the writers of the books, Suzanne Selfers and Shannon Hale. I mean, like, the writers of the show. I think all the writers just could not agree on who Rose Red would be, how that would play out, who would end up with Daring, like, just stuff like that. I think they couldn't agree on it, so I think that's why they didn't do it. But I think it's a good theory, and I think it's a good explanation for why Apple has blonde hair. I'll also tell you guys a little secret. The only reason Apple actually, in reality, has blonde hair, like, non-lore reason, real-life reason she has blonde hair, is simply because, Mattel was trying to avoid any copyright infringement or issues with Disney. It didn't matter. Disney tried to take down Ever After High anyway, so it didn't matter. But yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure to like and comment on this video. It really helps. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok. I have my Etsy shop where I make doll clothes listed below. I'm also currently working on the Doll Crafter Marketplace, which is a startup. It's a startup marketplace specifically for doll collectors, made by doll collectors. The goal of the marketplace is to allow goods relating to doll customization and doll restyling to be easily sold. So again, things like doll clothes, things like eyes for doll customization, things like, you know, rerouting materials. We want to be able to sell these on this platform. So if you're interested in the Doll Crafter Marketplace becoming a real thing, like just a cozy little community for all the doll collectors to buy and sell goods, if you want it to become a real thing, go down below and join the waitlist on Doll Crafter's website so you can show your support for the Doll Crafter Marketplace being developed. Hey, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to let me know what kind of videos you would like in the future, because I do have another doll review coming up, and I do want to make more theories, but I actually kind of have a Star Wars lore / theory video completely planned out. It's about Ahsoka. If you know, Ahsoka's my girl. And I have had this video idea, like, planned out since, like, last summer. I probably should revise it, but I've had it planned out, but I was always, like, too nervous to, like, film a whole YouTube video on it because I didn't think anybody would be interested, because I know you guys really like my Ever After High content, but I don't know so much about the Star Wars content. But yeah, if you are a Star Wars fan and you're excited for Ahsoka Season 2 / you're just kind of confused about the lore and you want somebody to fill you in on the lore of what's going on with Ahsoka and Star Wars, this video might be a good idea. So I don't know, let me know if you'd like to see more videos that aren't doll related. I am still mainly gonna be doing doll related videos, obviously. Just, like, can I mix in some other fun fantasy related stuff? Because I mean, Star Wars is just fantasy in space, so I don't really see how it's that different from any of the other stuff I talk about. So would you guys be okay with that? Let me know. Bye. And yeah, like, if you made it to this part of the video, comment a bee emoji down below. The only reason I'm saying that is because right now I'm looking at, like, my Minecraft bee plushie, but if you made it and you want the Ahsoka video, comment Ahsoka or comment a bee emoji because of my Minecraft bee plushie. It's really cute. Anyway, bye.